Current drought conditions in Colorado range from moderate to exceptional. But no matter what the conditions are in any given year, conserving water is always important, especially in our arid climate and as we face tremendous growth in the coming years. We'll look at conservation, water quality, and ensuring water supply for the future on this edition of Connected Colorado. Hi, I'm Wendy Brockman. Big cities and small towns across Colorado are working hard to protect our most precious resource, water. In a few moments, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to discuss water issues. But first, let's look at how one city is saving water.
The city of Denver has made major strides in water conservation over the last few years.
We've been able to save over 2.5 billion gallons of water for Denver Parks and Recreation. Billion with a B. Yes, not million, but billion. We use water in a lot of different ways within Denver Parks and Recreation for our recreation centers, pools, fountains, but we use 96% of our overall water use for irrigation. So a lot of our focus in our water conservation division is on irrigation practices.
Among the water-saving strategies used by Denver Parks and Recreation is upgrading old irrigation methods to a much more efficient central controlled irrigation system.
When we manage our water systems more accurately, so when it rains and we are able to centrally control and shut off all of our irrigation systems, for every inch per acre that we save across all of our 3,000 irrigated acres, we save $150,000. With central control, the conversion to central control irrigation units, we anticipate at least a 15% overall water savings, and that's on the conservative side. Typically, we can see up to 20 or 30% water savings.
Another conservation strategy is using more water-efficient native grasses and plant material.
As we build new parks within Denver Parks and Recreation, we're also looking to make sure we have diverse landscapes. And when we are able to turn our sort of passive areas over to low water landscapes, that can easily save us 60 to 70% of what we would normally irrigate turf at. Central Park for Denver Parks and Recreation is considered one of our regional parks. It was built around 2008, and it's a really good example of how we're trying to blend the different landscape types within one park. The park is 80 acres in size, about 65 of it is irrigated, and only about 20 of those irrigated acres are actually bluegrass. The rest are native grasses, shrubs, low water trees. We have a xeriscape garden here. Some of the other things we're doing for water conservation is to work with Denver Water to convert our parks from potable water to recycled water. Since 2004, when we began making the switch, we've converted 30% of our park irrigated acreage over to recycled water.
In drought years or in normal years, Denver strives for a balance between weather conditions, water conservation, and maintaining plant health.
During drought years, Parks works closely with Denver Water. When we're in stage 1 drought, our water use consumption should be 10% less than what our normal consumption is. In a stage 2 drought, we're required to reduce our water consumption by 20% to 35%. In regular years, our priorities are to keep our parks looking as good as we can and still maintain our water budgets. In drought years, we have a focus on long-lived plant materials such as trees and plant materials that would be difficult to replace that take a long time to grow. Another focus that we have is on athletic fields and those areas that are highly used by children and the public so that the parks can still be utilized during a time of drought.
With these and many other water conservation methods, Denver Parks and Recreation is committed to saving water while maintaining our beautiful city parklands for now and into the future.
Our newest parks built out at Stapleton, Lowry, our parks out in Green Valley Ranch and Parkfield, all use the same techniques of trying to use only turf in the high activity use areas. I think the public's been very responsive to us changing the look of our plant palettes. I think in part because they recognize water as a precious resource within Colorado.
And now joining me to discuss this most precious resource are Jim Lockhead, CEO and manager of Denver Water. Welcome. Mark Koliber, Water Supply Director for Thornton, and Dick Leffler, Engineering and Utilities Director for the town of Frederick, which is in northern Colorado. Welcome, gentlemen. Jim, let's start with you. Earlier this spring, Denver Water said it needed to save 16 billion gallons of water. Were you able to do it?
We did. Our customers responded to messaging that we gave that we were going to be in a really severe drought year. And we saved 20% over the last 10 years through our conservation campaign. And this year, our customers saved an additional 23% on top of that. So they were fantastic. And even though we've lifted our restrictions and we've gone from 2-day-a-week watering to 3-day-a-week, they're still saving water. Our demand continues to be down. So they're doing a great job.
How are they doing it?
It's behavioral change. It's continued messaging that we give to our customers about water being a valuable resource and what they can do to save money and still have great landscapes with less water.
Creative.
Yeah.
Mark, Thornton has also eased its watering restrictions, but you still have a very aggressive water conservation plan. Tell us about that.
Sure, and I think it's important to distinguish between drought restrictions and water conservation plans as well, because drought restrictions are short-term, put in place to really address a short-term need. Water conservation, as Jim says, is a long-term behavioral change effort, and we provide incentives for our residents to save water, such as having a rebate for purchasing low-flow washing machines or something like that. And we give them tools to use as well to help them conserve water. One of our most popular programs is getting a professional out to have them look at their irrigation system, review how it operates, look at their sprinkler heads, and give them some ideas on how they might be able to save water.
So an added benefit for them is they can save some money.
That's right.
It's a good incentive.
It is.
Now, Dick, tell me about your conservation efforts in Frederick. I imagine your situation is unique compared to, the situation in Metro Denver.
Well, it's similar, but of course on a different scale. And the town of Frederick, the board decided to go with a voluntary water restriction program that's been in place for some time. So like the other two municipalities, we do a lot of education, a lot of promotion to make people aware of what the situation is, what the water supply for the year is, but we're on a voluntary basis is what we've done. So we haven't actually had mandatory restrictions.
How many residents?
We have approximately 10,000 people in Frederick at this time. It's a rapidly growing community. It's a challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
But we've been doing a good job of saving water this year just with the voluntary efforts.
Getting the message out. Water, it's easy to take for granted until it's no longer there, right? What are some of the things behind the scenes that you guys do to get the water to our faucets at home? What would you want people to know about that, Jim?
Water is a 24/7, 365 business. People turn on their tap and they expect to have water there. So what that means is from collecting water in our reservoirs, for example, Dillon Reservoir is part of our system, 11 Mile, Antero, Gross Reservoir, to transporting it down to our treatment plants. Those treatment plants are running 24 hours a day. We need people there. To keeping the pipes repaired. If it's New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve, our crews are out there repairing main breaks and assuring that the water is delivered. To maintaining security in our system. To working with our customers on how they use water and how we bill. So it's a multifaceted and complex operation directed toward the relatively simple task of turning on your tap and having some water come out.
Anything different in Thornton to what Jim is saying?
No, the only thing I'd add is in front of all of that are the efforts to develop a water supply that can take decades. To bring just an idea forward, go through the process of water court, building the projects, design, construction, everything else. It takes decades before you can actually bring that water into the treatment plants.
So regardless of whether your community is large or small, the issue of securing water for the future is so critical. What are some of the challenges we're facing in this area? We'll start with Jim.
It's uncertainty from our perspective. Climate change, for example, is going to change runoff patterns. It's going to make wildfires more frequent, and wildfires have an effect on the water quality in our system as well as our facilities. So we've come to view our infrastructure and our system as not just the treatment plants and the reservoirs, but the watersheds that supply our water, because it needs to be clean, it needs to be sustainable, it needs to be there. Security issues are extremely important. How we grow as a metropolitan area is going to greatly affect how we plan and develop water decades into the future. What we've done at Denver Water is develop what we call scenario planning, where we envision different futures about what the Denver metro area might look like 50, 100 years from now. And then we have to be able to basically meet any one of those futures in our responsibility to have a secure water supply for the community.
Dick, people may not know this, but Frederick is one of the fastest growing areas in the country.
Yes.
Little Frederick.
Yeah, Little Frederick, when I started 10 years ago, we were beginning a growth boom where we averaged 16% growth for over 5 years. Now, we bottomed out in 2009 with the economic decline, but that's been steadily coming back, and we're growing at over 6% a year again. So the challenge is securing that future water supply for that growing population.
And you're working on that right now. You have a very creative plan in the works, kind of a water sharing plan for northern Colorado. Tell us briefly about this project.
Sure. The town of Frederick is one of 15 participants in the Northern Integrated Supply Project. It's called NISP. And this is constructing a large reservoir north of Fort Collins along with a smaller reservoir out east. It's a project that develops a new water supply. As Jim and Mark, I think, mentioned, we want to avoid going out and taking the water off of irrigated agriculture. We think that's important both economically and environmentally. So this is developing a new project where we capture the high water flows during the wet years, store those in a reservoir for the dry years. And we're not drying up the pooter like some people have claimed. Our junior water right doesn't allow us to do that. We're skimming the peaks, storing that. It's water that the state of Colorado is entitled to through interstate compacts. Otherwise, it runs out to Nebraska. But Colorado is entitled to it. So this is a great water supply for the region, we think.
Thornton has its own water supply and is one of the largest suppliers in the state. What do you see for the future?
We have some short-term plans of building some additional reservoir storage along the South Platte, and we do that by reclaiming old gravel pit reservoirs. So we line them so that the water doesn't seep out, and we convert those over to a storage reservoir. That'll carry us through to about 2020 or so. And then in the long run, we have what we call our Thornton Northern Project, which is water that we acquired in the mid-'80s in the area of northern Colorado, and we're getting started on the process of bringing that water from north of Fort Collins down to the city of Thornton by 2020 to 2025.
Regional cooperation is sounding like a theme here for Denver, Thornton, Frederick, I think all water supply entities. We're going to continue this discussion in a moment, but first let's take a look at how Lakewood is working to protect our lakes, streams, and waterways.
Water. Clean. Clear. Flowing. Water is life. The City of Lakewood strives to keep our water and waterways as clean as possible, especially near construction sites. In order to do that, the city follows the Best Management Practices, or BMPs, outlined by the Federal Clean Water Act. Every time the city starts a construction project near a waterway, BMPs are carefully practiced to keep dirt and mud from leaving the site and clogging waterways. Without those measures, the results could be problematic for our community.
On any construction site that we have in the City of Lakewood, we're required to have best management practices in place. When BMPs are not used on construction sites, we see a great deal of sediment and pollutants leaving those sites and entering the waterways.
4 main types of best management practices help prevent soil loss problems: access control, perimeter control, erosion control, and sediment capture. There is a science to keeping soil in place, and depending on the construction site, one or more of these measures may be used.
BMPs are specific to job sites, so when you have, say, additional slope, steep slopes, you're going to be using a specific BMP that treats that kind of an environment.
It's important for the public to stay away from construction sites and the various control measures that are being used to keep dirt and mud in their proper place.
The BMPs that we have in the city of Lakewood are there usually temporarily. Some things are permanent, but when you see a BMP in Lakewood, leave it alone. We're just trying to let those things work, and when they're no longer needed, we'll remove them.
After construction is finished, city staff often will use an erosion control measure like an erosion control blanket to help stabilize and revegetate the site. Other techniques might include a mulch cover that looks like green paint combined with native seed to reestablish vegetation.
Construction sites are identified by the EPA as the #1 contributor of sediment to our waterways. We treat it very seriously in the city. The other cities in the metro area treat it the same way.
So when you encounter a construction site, please respect its boundaries. Appreciate the thought, care, and work that went into Lakewood's best management practices there. With all of us working together, we'll not only protect our water, we'll continue to build Lakewood into one of the greenest, most enjoyable cities in the country.
We'll learn more about what we can all do to keep our waterways clean coming up later. Right now, we're going to turn the discussion back over to Mark. What issues do you face in Thornton in terms of water quality?
Going back to our earlier discussion, we talked about water supply development. A lot of the higher quality supplies have already been developed. And so for the metro region, a lot of what's left is the South Platte River. The South Platte River is impacted by the stormwater flows that you just saw in the City of Lakewood piece. It's also impacted by wastewater flows coming from wastewater treatment plants. To treat that kind of water, you have to implement advanced drinking water treatment processes. Those processes are expensive to construct, and they're really expensive to maintain and operate. That's what we're facing in the future. When we took a step back and looked at the region, we said, we've got people paying on one hand for the drinking water treatment. They're paying on another hand for the stormwater treatment before it goes into the river, and they're certainly paying for wastewater treatment before that water is discharged. You've got a lot of people paying resources into the process of cleaning up water, whether it's on the discharge side or the drinking water side. We were thinking that on a regional basis, why not look at what all these people are paying and see if there's a better way to use those resources to help the South Platte River, the discharge side and the drinking water side all together, kind of a regional approach to water quality on a holistic basis.
And this is the same plan for Denver Water.
We have, I would say, over 40 different entities within the Denver metro area that provide water service to residents of the Denver metro area. And obviously it makes sense for us to partner on a regional level and not be competing with each other for limited water supplies or having to treat the water quality of other entities. And a lot of that regionalism is working. For example, on the water quality side, the Highline Canal, which is an extraordinary recreational asset for the city and county of Denver and the region, is actually a ditch that's owned by Denver Water. We're not able to run water through that canal all the time, and the water that we run through it is lost to seepage. So we're in a partnership with Douglas County, Arapahoe County, Denver, a number of different entities to utilize the Highline Canal as a stormwater receptacle that would allow it to maintain the trees and the canopy and the recreational amenity, but also double as water treatment. We're working with Aurora and the South Metro area in Douglas County to bring sustainable waters to Douglas County. Currently that area is on non-tributary groundwater, which means that it's a limited, finite resource that's going to run out at some point. We're working together to bring a new water supply to that area. And then as we see future growth in the Denver metro area, the mayor has a vision for an aerotropolis and an airport city. We're going to need to work together with Adams County and other entities to develop sustainable water supplies for that additional growth.
Jim, looking to the future, a big land use issue for the metropolitan area is density, as you call it. Mm-hmm. If we have more smaller, compact urban areas, it's obviously easier and to deliver water if you're not so spread out.
It is. And the Denver metro area on a relative basis is really not very dense. We're not very urban as a metropolitan area. We can get a lot denser. And if you think about the values that make Colorado, Colorado, what attracts people to Colorado, it's the mountains, it's skiing, it's recreation, it's a healthy agricultural economy, and it's some great cities that we have. And if we're going to have those values maintained and be able to grow sustainably to a Front Range that in 50 years may be 5 million people, I think we really need to think seriously about how we can grow up instead of out. And that means coordinating water, transportation infrastructure like fast tracks and development around that, transit-oriented development where people can bike and walk and use mass transit. It will save water. It will mean less costly energy and more efficient transportation and an urban environment that promotes innovation, educational, cultural opportunities. That the benefits of higher density are just enormous, I think, for the Denver Front Range. Let's get some closing comments from each of you. Dick, let's start with you. How do you secure our water future while maintaining a commitment to the environment and having a healthy agricultural economy? Just some quick closing thoughts.
Well, in the case of Frederick, the NISP project is an example of how we think this has to be done or should be done. It's developing the available water resources, capturing them in the wet years, capturing them in the spring runoff when climate changes impact the way water comes down. So it's developing the new water sources. It's working with the irrigated ag community. The NISP project, we're cooperating with 2 irrigation companies where we exchange water. We use the high quality mountain water first, and then we in turn provide a little more water than the irrigators used to have to help them out. So it's a cooperative effort. It's working together on a regional basis to stretch the water supplies as far as we can.
Some closing thoughts from you, Mark?
Kind of parallel to what Dick said. I think the first piece is really focus on conservation, get as much out of your existing water supplies as you can. Push the limits of what you can really use your existing supplies for. And then you go out and you look for new supplies. And as we've mentioned before, there aren't really all that many options. It's either a new supply from the western slope or it's water coming out of the agricultural system. The City of Thornton's project is bringing water out of the agricultural system. The City Council had a vision back in 1985, acquired those water rights, and has been working on that project since then. And I think that's where we're going in the future, and the City of Thornton is in good shape because of that.
Jim, a lot of pieces to the puzzle.
There are. To me, the big key, again, is regional partnerships and growing more densely. If we have a future of sprawl up and down the Front Range, it's not going to be a sustainable future from a water standpoint. A sustainable future means maximizing the use of water that we have today. That means we're going to be doing more and more reuse and recycling opportunities. And it also means minimizing our water footprint in the state, whether it's additional supplies from the West Slope or working with the agricultural community to partner to maintain a healthy agricultural economy. That I think we can do it as a community if we work together. If we're fighting one off against the other, it's going to be a future that's going to be contentious and ultimately not sustainable.
Our thanks to all 3 of you guys for being here today. Appreciate the discussion. Jim Lockhead, Mark Kohleber, and Dick Leffler. Thank you so much, guys. Earlier, we looked at one aspect of keeping our rivers and streams clean. Well, let's now look at what Greenwood Village is doing to help protect our waterways and what you can do to help.
Take a journey alongside the many streams and ponds throughout Greenwood Village, and you will see and hear one of nature's most precious resources, water. In its purest form, water is vital to creating and maintaining life by supplying nourishment to animals, vegetation, and people. But it is not the water you consume from a faucet in your home or from your shower that we're talking about. That kind of water is treated and purified before you use it. Rather, it's the water that is never treated that needs your attention. It's called runoff. Runoff is the water that comes from the sky when it rains and the snow once it melts. It can go directly into water bodies or travel along grass-lined ditches or wetlands from higher elevations to lower elevations. Even the overflow from your sprinklers and garden hoses becomes runoff. And the runoff that overflows from your lawns or over parking lots and streets can take with it a great number of pollutants that are carried down into storm sewers and end up in our reservoirs, ponds, and creeks, affecting wildlife, vegetation, and people. Some of these pollutants include fertilizers and herbicides, garbage and pesticides, yard waste, fuels from your automobile, and animal waste. Unfortunately, as soon as these contaminants reach a storm sewer, the water is not treated. What goes into a storm sewer stays in, as contaminants make their way into the water we play in and the water plants and wildlife need to survive. And it's what you can't see in the water, like strains of bacteria that come from fecal animal or human waste and other potentially harmful viruses, because when ingested, they can be deadly or cause serious side effects like diarrhea, cramping, and fever. And if oxygen levels in water are compromised due to high algae blooms, wildlife must struggle for survival. The large blooms of algae are not just unsightly, but they eventually die and fall to the bottom of our waterways. At the bottom, the algae decompose, causing water oxygen levels to fall. The falling oxygen level can cause the water to smell and even kill fish. In turn, the health of animals and birds that rely on fish are affected. That is why protecting our natural waterways is so important. But here in Greenwood Village, stringent efforts are taken to ensure that the quality of our water for wildlife and recreational activities is well maintained for the betterment of our environment. The village has adopted water quality measures that exceed other municipalities by lobbying for more stringent water quality regulations. Due to the village's efforts, the water that flows into neighboring Cherry Creek Reservoir is now better protected because the village works with several agencies and organizations to address the water quality. The village also makes assessments as to how new development projects will impact water quality. Construction sites are required to install runoff control methods such as the placement of silt fencing, erosion blankets, and inlet protection to greatly reduce soil and waste that could flow down streets and into our storm sewers. And capital improvement projects like Greenwood Gulch, Cayley Pond, and Horseshoe Pond help protect water quality by naturally filtering out pollutants. Other visible pollutants, such as trash, are cleared out of the storm sewers by the village. Weather permitting, weekly street sweeping also helps to maintain our roads to keep pollutants from running down into the storm sewers and impacting water quality. And the village provides free services to residents, such as a household waste program that allows for pickup of toxic household materials such as paints and solvents that, if improperly disposed of, could pollute the environment. Pet waste stations are also available to allow for the convenience of picking up and disposing of pet waste throughout our many beautiful parks and trails. But your help is still greatly needed. Try to minimize lawn and other landscape treatments and keep them off the sidewalks and streets. Pick up after your pets and properly dispose of garbage. Maintain your vehicle from leaking oil and other waste onto the ground. And never dispose of anything in a storm sewer. So please, do your part in our community effort to ensure the quality of water in our lakes, ponds, and streams. Together, we can continue to make the village a beautiful, clean, and environmentally safe place to live and work. For additional information or to report any illegal dumping, call the Greenwood Village Public Works Department at 303-708-6100 during normal business hours. After hours, please call 911. You can also visit the village's website at greenwoodvillage.com for more information on water quality. This message has been brought to you by Greenwood Village.
Thank you for joining us. Please check with your local municipality or water department to learn more about what you can do to conserve water in your area and keep our natural waterways clean. We'll see you next time on Connected Colorado.